I will wait 15 seconds to make sure is everything configured. Hello, everybody. I am Jesús Manuel Muñoz Tejeda. I represent the Swiss Space Center as a space technology advisor. And today we're going to have a relaxed section with talking about the space technology. More especially, we're going to talk about the space communication. And we're going to talk about a project called Celestial, which has participated within this year with us, with the Swiss Space Center, within the European Space Agency laboratory, IGLUNA. So I have some experts with me today to talk about space technology, space communication, and I would like to introduce all of them right now. This is the title of the session of today. It's called Space Communications for the Future, because what we are actually doing is talking about Celestial, which is a project that is going to enhance the communication systems for the immune environment. And they are going to explain to us how they can do it within time, scope, and schedule. This is the agenda for the session of today. I will present in everybody in the session. I will explain about the European Space Agency IGLUNA laboratory. I will call about Celestial, and then I will jump up to the technical session in which we are going to introduce what is the state of the art of those devices, the current development of Celestial, the future steps of the project. And then thanks to our experts that have joined today, we will talk about some recommendations in terms of entrepreneurship, how to make space into the business sector, especially in the space applications, and then some conclusions for the talk. I am Jesús Manuel Muñoz Tejeda, and I will be representing the Swiss Space Center as the Space Technology Advisor. And with me, I have Mr. Mayank, which is the Celestial Technology owner. Hello, Mayank.
Hi, I'm representing Celestial. We are also part of IGLUNA, and yeah, I'm founder of Celestial. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayank. I also have with me Dr. Frank Zimmerman. Dr. Frank, thank you very much for joining.
Yes, hello. It's really a pleasure being here today. As you can see from the background, I'm in my home office, but normally I'm working for cesah. I'm managing director of an incubator. So we support startups in the development of their products and services related to space. So downstream for the application, but also upstream to enhance the space systems. I'm an aerospace engineer, and originally I'm coming from Telespazio VEGA Deutschland GmbH, which is a company which is one of the commercial shareholders of this incubator. And I'm working part-time there as well on the product policy management. And again, it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frank. It's indeed a real pleasure. We also have with us Mr. Kristof Geilenkotten. Hello, Kristof. Nice to hear from you, and thank you for joining the call.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristof. I've been working for ST Engineering Direct for 18 years in satellite telecommunication. My biggest affinity is in physical layer and machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I'm also managing director of the ST Engineering iDirect GmbH in Berlin. Nice to hear you all.
Thank you very much, Kristof. And lastly, but not least, we have Robert Boehme. Hello, Robert. Again, a pleasure that you are with us today. And if you can tell us about your background, it will be fantastic.
Yeah, hello, and thanks for the shorthand invitation. Yeah, I'm Robert Boehme, founder of PTS, a planetary transportation system, or as many of you still know it as part-time scientists or PT scientists. And we built spacecrafts for the moon for the past 12 years. And we've developed a lot of spacecrafts together with the European Space Agency, DLR, and many other partners.
Thank you very much, Robert. Really challenging indeed. So it will be a pleasure to hear more from you in the technical session Q&A. Right now, I'm going to explain the Swiss Space Center IGLUNA program, which is a European Space Agency laboratory, and the relevance of the IGLUNA laboratory within the Celestial project, on how IGLUNA can help other projects of similar features to develop their technologies within the Swiss environment. This is IGLUNA in a nutshell. So basically, we're trying to developed a space habitat using remote operations, and we are developing some technologies with thanks to all the students all around the world in extreme environments, trying to simulate the immune environment that actually they will face there. This is a European Space Agency laboratory initiative, and we've been running this program since 2018-2019. So it's the second year we are running this program. And basically, as I said, we're developing bottom-up ideas for the future of space exploration. We are communicating not only in academia, but also with the industry. And basically, we are fostering and encouraging students from all over the world to do research, to start their own projects, and to join more about the space. Thanks to our technology, we can help students to develop their ideas that can actually become startups in the future, that can have a space in the business sector, and we can encourage other students to do the same for future missions. The Swiss Space Center is joining all the entities related to the space sector in Switzerland, and we have partners all around in order to make it happen. This is some of the highlights for last year IGLUNA. Basically, we were developing the technologies into this extreme environment, and you can see that the students were actually testing their devices over there. Of course, within space exploration, it's very important to have reusability of the resources and in situ vegetables growth, and this is what we were doing there. We also have an exhibition room in which people from all Switzerland and surroundings can join and can know more about the space technology and how IGLUNA have helped us to develop this. This is the ESA General Director who was invited into IGLUNA. And this year we will also have his participation in some of the events. So I will recommend you to go to our website, which is swisspacecenter.com, which can be found in the top right corner of the screen, and know more about IGLUNA and about these projects. Right now, I'm going to talk about Celestial, and I have Mayank, as I said, the founder of this technology, and how we have helped Celestial in order to develop the technology within IGLUNA 2020. Celestial is within the communication and navigation area within IGLUNA 2020, and is one of the 15 teams that has helped us to develop IGLUNA 2020 initiative. In a nutshell, we can say that Celestial, and Mayank will explain deeper, is trying to enhance space communications, and to do that, they are developing a communication system around the moon, which counts of 3 CubeSats in a polar orbit that will communicate with each other, giving full coverage of the moon environment. And they are developing some antennas that will communicate from the moon surface to the satellites that will be around the moon. So it's basically a complete program. Mayank, could you give us a deeper overview of the vision of Celestial?
Yes, of course. So we started with this project actually 2 years back when we were in Acton Space, a hackathon, and me and my co-founder, Johannes, we together thought about it. What is the next step the space industry is going to take? And it was very clear it's going to be the moon for space exploration. At that time also, PTS was getting big name. There was lunar XPrize, so moon was gaining weightage, and it was very easy to see that moon is going to be very strategic celestial body now. And we thought, what can we do as a students who would like to go for moon? Yes, obviously the biggest challenge for us was that if we design a CubeSat like satellite, which is feasible for academics, it cannot operate on moon or cannot do moon missions because the energy intensive communications are not possible with such a small satellite. So there was naturally a need for communication infrastructure. So we started thinking in this direction, and we came up that there has to be a constellation, and there will be a need for a constellation which is required to build this infrastructure and offer it. And this has one big advantage, which we saw directly, was that a different class of space explorers, which are students, which we were ourselves, will actually be able to do space exploration, moon activities. And you know, there is a unique thing about students. They are curious and they have limited knowledge, so they don't know where the knowledge or the knowledge circle of human mankind ends. So sometimes they cross, and this is where innovations happen. And this was a very key thing which we wanted to enable. So we came up with this. We decided there will be 3 satellites. It has to be single launch. So every satellite must be around 50 to 60 kgs, 200 kgs max the constellation weight, and having a communication system and antennas which are able to connect at the same time with multiple systems. For example, there can be a rover, there can be a lander, and there can be an orbiter. So we should have a communication system that understands the need and customizes itself on the communication standards and is able to communicate with everyone or every type of mission to their needs and make communication possible evenly. And then we also did our own link budget. So I designed the link budgets and we came up with a concept what a ground station would be. And we then made entire communication architecture that would be required on Earth, in the lunar orbit, and on the moon surface. And this is what you see on this slide as highlighted key components and entire architecture. But on the next slide.
Thank you very much, Mayank.
Yeah.
So, yes, could you explain in a nutshell for everybody that's connected now what is Celestial, what you try to achieve in short words?
So the mission statement for Celestial is to actually, right now, we are focusing on designing the hardware. We are focusing on designing our own technology. We are not focusing on designing the satellites that has to go to moon. This is simply not possible by the startup like us to do this in a reasonable time when this is required. So we are focusing on developing the core technology of this communication, or so to say, relay constellation. And this would be communication systems and antennas. And we are using software-defined radios and additively manufactured customized antennas. So to say, we already developed our first MVPs, which is an antenna, and which I will explain later in this session. But this would be basically the key enabling technologies. And now, since we are part of IGLUNA, this also makes a very good case, since we want to put this communication system and antennas to our customers, which would be rover, which would be lander, which would be lunar habitat, and communicate with the relay constellation that will provide this communication infrastructure. So in IGLUNA, we had this objectives to reach at least TRL level 3 from TRL level 1 of the communication system technology. The communication system should be, as one new CubeSat, as I explained, why we had the vision for one new CubeSat, and overall system performance should be improved by additive manufacturing, because our system will have the capability that a ground operator could remotely reconfigure the system to operate on minimum power input. And now we want to contribute to this power loss, which we have because of the power supply from the satellite, in a way that we give gain from the antennas. So our antenna should improve the signal. And this was why we have additive manufacturing coming into picture, to have these complex designs printed very easily and with the material we desire. And so there will be R&D on materials that we will do. And system shall have 1 Mbps, which is a minimum. Actually, we will target now, we already know this is possible. We will target now going up beyond. 3 is minimum, and maximum we will try 10 Mbps in the future. And system should be remotely configurable, which actually has a new application in Earth sector or Earth space sector, which would be reusability of satellites. I will explain that also in further session.
Thank you very much, Mayank. So basically, with all the development that you've done during this year, I think you are looking for making your project bigger, catch more stakeholders, and make Celestial possible. So basically, actually develop this communication system in the moon. Could you summarize what you actually are looking for all the stakeholders that might be watching you?
Yeah, definitely. So at this time, we are looking at our 2 technology lines. One is for the antennas, other one is for the communication system. The antenna right now would be a simple patch antenna, and this is where we need expert feedbacks to tell us if we are in the right direction. We are thinking on improving the first element of the antenna and then use the same element repeatedly to create an array antennas, which would be the technology for moon. When you have an array antenna on moon, you don't need to move your antennas, and then you can just beam steer your antenna for communication and for signal. And this is the ideal thing that is required for the moon missions, for any mission, not just for relay mission. So we are going in this direction with our antennas. With the communication systems, we are going and evolving to make it reconfigurable while in orbit, and to be used as minimum power and give maximum efficiency. For all of this, having all this organizational management and technology development process we have estimated our budget to be around 750k euros. That should be there for another 1 year. We want to do R&D in antennas, in materials. Also, we want to build our own software-defined radios. So software-defined radio is basically something that can be reconfigured, not hardwired communication system. And then we want to do a market entry this year with our antennas already. We are looking for partnerships. We are looking for partners as long-term partners. We do not, we don't want, or I don't personally believe in short-term partnerships, because long-term partnerships are where you have the chemistry, where you can trust your partner. And this is where I think is possible for us to achieve our vision with our partners. So this is why we are looking for partners who can help us realize our vision, who can help us reach our business goals in short term. And we are looking for development facilities, for testing facilities. And at this time, we are just startup right out of college, right out of the classroom. So we are looking for all these expert people and who can guide us and show the direction. And we are looking for pilot projects that we can go for and prove our technology and gain the credibility of space industry.
Thank you very much, Mayank. So it's indeed a lot of things that are needed, but that doesn't mean at all that you don't have a lot with you, that you have achieved a lot. And this is also very well seen in this graph over here, when we can see all the partners that are actually now with Celestial. We have with us Robert today, which is the founder of PTS, which is one of the partnership of Celestial. We have academic, we have ST engineering, OVH. I think we have a lot of potential within your idea, and all your partners are going to support you in the next future. So congratulations in advance for your project.
Thank you very much.
Now I'm going to jump straight to the technical Q&A, because I think we are quite lucky to have those experts on the field with us today. So I'm going to talk about 4 topics mainly. First, I would like to introduce the state of the art of this communication. Then what is the current development of Celestial, how experts see it from an unbiased point of view, the future steps for the project, and then what are all the recommendations that the experts could give, not only to Celestial, but to other projects that are trying to develop the same kind of technology. So with that being said, I would like to ask the first question, and this is, I would like Mayank, first of all, to have your expertise on the topic, because I would like to know what is your vision on the current technologies that are for space communication. What is the state of the art of those devices? What do you have to aim for?
I think there can be different answers to this. First of all, the communications are going in 2 directions. Now optic communications is coming into picture, which is having its own advantages, getting us free from bandwidths and reserving the frequencies. And also it has got different advantages, very powerful communications. What we are working on is still RF. So I still believe RF communication is an evergreen communications. And they have their own typical advantages, which are not overpowered by this new optical communications. Having said that, what I would say is at this time, software-defined radios is becoming key technology. As I outlined the advantages, there are already some systems available in the market for bigger satellite, very costly, and operating in the different frequency range and offering various advantages to bigger satellites. These systems typically are unable to operate with low power inputs, which makes it a problematic for academics. This is where we want to try to and give advantage of these kind of systems. But as far as antennas are concerned, I think there is a big scope for improvement. I actually am trying to see where if we can already go into and have software-defined antennas as well. There is a scope for that. There is a scope for improving the materials with which you're printing the antennas. Typically, what I believe when it comes to the communication systems, or so to say general systems for space industry is a little bit reluctant in absorbing a very new system with a new technology because of obvious reasons. It's costly project and nobody wants to increase their risk factors. But as we move ahead, I think there are technologies which needs to be implemented in order to improve the systems and get better efficiency on this. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mayank. Frank, would you like to add something to the topic of the state of the art of the space communications? What do you really think is important for developing something in this area?
Well, I see it from an application point of view. As you know, I'm not a satellite communication expert, but I see more the applications around. My background is in navigation, for instance, and this is already a good example from my point of view, because you need to distribute corrections. So you need to be able to have a link to your back end all the time, which is of course not always possible via terrestrial communication. So you need satellite communication. So even for applications on ground, this is much relevant. Then of course, if you want to have a quick access to Earth observation pictures, you again need maybe via relay satellites, you need downlinks that are proper and giving you all the data you need in time. And what was said already in terms of the antenna technologies, I would fully agree that flat antennas with beam steering are, of course, the future. We have contact to very innovative startups also here in Darmstadt, which are looking into that. And of course, this is also something which is building up and where systems become available more and more. And as a final remark, there is still this myth that satellite communication is very expensive. I mean, it of course first depends on the bandwidth, but it's getting cheaper and cheaper. We all know that. And if you think about the Internet of Things, we definitely need to have such elements alongside the terrestrial means. So yes, of course, there is a bright future. It's a commercial activity. And we see more and more integrated applications which combine Earth observation, satellite navigation, and of course, satellite communication together to allow for improvements in many areas.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Frank. I agree with you. And I think it's a very good idea to bring up what is the USP of Celestial, actually. USP stands for unique selling proposition. So based on the state of art, Frank has introduced how important is the space communication and how is the market being grown nowadays. What do you think Celestial can bring, Mayank, to the future that no other can do?
So yes, with Celestial, as we are part of IGLUNA, so we designed this communication system already, which is our fully functional prototype hardware. This hardware was worked all by students, and this hardware has a capability that you can use, MATLAB, you can use GNU Radio, which is, basic softwares that are used by students itself. So we are trying to bring the threshold of communication, space communication, to classrooms, to that low level that everybody can actually start playing with it. Communication, what I felt as a student, was not much taken up field. People were, some found it boring, some found it reluctant to understand. It was, something not like people found interesting like structures or something like attitude control, where you have coding and other things. People wanted challenges, and I somehow found interest in this. And then I came across these kind of things, which made it very easy for me to understand. And I think this has to come to classroom level. So this is one advantage we want to provide. Second one, obviously, I said, as we want to enable reusability of satellites. So here I will explain this. When you have a system, for example, in the orbit and a satellite is using it, for example, let's say our university, our partner university, Technical University Berlin, he already has 14 satellites up there. And they're using it, for example. And now an industry like us, let's say our project says we need one satellite. Now we build together one satellite with them, and they launch it. They keep it there for themselves for 2 years, and after 2 years, the satellite still has life, and we want to use it, but the communication of the frequency is not available with us, so we cannot use it. Now, if we have a communication system that we are building, could be reconfigured again while in the orbit, and we can change the orbit with orbit maneuvers. We can reuse the satellite. So if this is possible, what we want to do, we will be able to reuse the satellites. This means there will be less launches, there will be less developments, there will be less energy intensive processes to develop the satellite. This would be a huge cost saving for the entire space. And we know what happened when we started reusing rockets. It's a huge thing already. So these are visions, and these are technical developments moving in this direction for us.
Yeah, absolutely. The reconfiguration of Celestial is actually something that is going to open a big market. And in rocketry, actually, is going to be very, very important. So I think, Vincent, that I think we have covered in a whole what is the business applications that Celestial could have in the future. Kristof, would you like to add something more? What do you see Celestial being in the future? What are the business applications that this kind of technology could have?
Okay. Hi, everybody. So what I noted down is we are in telecommunication, satellite telecommunication, but on the Earth, not on Moon. But we have more customers on Earth than on Moon anyway. So what I noted down mainly is the research you do in SDR, software-defined radio, which we're also exploring. But we on Earth have a bit more difficulties because we have to have higher throughputs than the 1 megabits per second. So that makes it really hard for doing SDR. And secondly, what I find interesting of the project that you are working on is the flat array antennas, the steerable antennas. And for that, it's also important as we are moving into mobility in providing internet on cruise ships, on boats, other boats, vessels, and airplanes. So those are the two things, the software-defined radio. I think that's very interesting to explore. And then mainly the flat array antennas. Now, on top of that, what I like to mention is that when we go down to the ModCodes, the modulation and coding standards, the industry standard that we use now is very near to the channel limit. So there we cannot improve much further anymore. So that's why we're looking at innovative companies or innovative startups that would challenge us on other areas other than the physical layer, because the physical layer is almost exploited. So that's basically it for me. And oh yeah, last but not least, I'm like I mentioned before, the facilities of ST Engineering iDirect in Berlin and Sint-Niklaas, but also in Herndon, are of course open for the team to do experiments, and if they need spectrum analyzers or modulators or demodulators, we can always help.
Absolutely. And as you said, we need to focus on the Earth business because this is actually what is currently available right now. And it can serve as a source of funding for using this application in an actual moon environment. But developing this kind of technology now in Earth is very important because it will solve a lot of problems afterwards. Thank you very much for your answer, Kristof. And now that I see that Robert is with Mayank, and so actually they have a very good relationship between. I think, Robert, you would like to Celestial to have some technology advancement. You would like to Celestial to be bigger and better. What is your advice to Celestial? What would you like to see Celestial in a few years?
I mean, there's not so much advice because right now the team is really going into a good direction. So everything that I can see is really, addressing the right points. And I just want to highlight, I really like the fact of the software-defined radio stack, which allows a full open source toolchain, which I think is very important because then you get away from these, what's it called, predefined solutions, that are specific to a certain company or use case. So you really have like a setup that you can adapt to the use case even later on when the mission profile changes. Because what I always see with missions and what we as PTS identified is the fact that you do one thing and then you have subsystems that are specifically tailored for one, how to put it, one step of the mission. But after this phase, one phase of the mission, so after this phase is complete, most of these subsystems and resources, they are basically being wasted. In the case of our lunar lander, for example, or even if you do a lunar orbiter, you basically carry them just around any longer. But if you can reuse them, for example, for computational purposes, for adapted communications, then you really get a benefit out of it. And this is a clear commercial benefit. And by the way, I really see that communication is the key critical infrastructure right now coming up. It was one of the key, it was the first, and it was the key infrastructure for kind of the kickoff in space here. Not just with Sputnik, but it will be for the entire lunar economy. So, as you can see with NASA, they're always, in that case, a good road to follow because of the budget. As you can see with NASA putting in so many billions into Artemis and CLIPS, so really making sure that there will be a lot of traffic towards the moon. Now ESA joining in with the last ministerial and some really key decisions that they made. You really see that there's lots of action coming up for the moon. And communication is still, I don't know, underestimated. People just say, let's use laser terminals, but everybody who understands how they work, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Amazon equipped all their data centers with RF communication stations, but not optical terminals yet. So there was a smart move by Amazon for AWS in that sense. So I really see that RF communications on the moon is like a game changer if you address it correctly. And I agree with the point that was raised earlier, that navigation kind of goes along with that. So it's not just communication, but navigation, these two aspects. So I think the team is tackling really the right area with the right technologies.
Absolutely, and I agree with you that Celestial is actually in the track for becoming bigger and better. And I would like to enhance the participation of Celestial within the IGLUNA ESA Lab initiative because they started, I think, when did you start, Mayank? Because I think you won
September last.
Okay, so and within this time you have achieved a lot. And I think you, at the end of the session, you can give some advice to other students that would like to put their projects in the actual real business, and how these kind of ideas like IGLUNA can help us developing them. Thank you very much, Robert, for your feedback. And right now that we have developed what the actual technology in terms of communications and also navigation is in the Earth and the Moon environment, I would like to talk about the future steps about Celestial. So Mayank, I know you've been participating in some contests lately. I would like you to devote some time on it. I think you were in Berlin, and I think you have very good news for next year, and you are going to participate in a European Space Agency big. Can you devote some time to that? I think the audience will be very interested in seeing how you have achieved what you have achieved from the very beginning to the very end, and what are the new steps and how you have achieved those.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit philosophical as a person I am, but when you have right intentions, things fall for you, in the places, in right places somehow. This is what happened with us. When we started, one thing was very sure: we were very genuine, telling what we want and how we will achieve this. And if somebody gives you an advice, please consider this very, very seriously. Try to incorporate why some advice has come to you, even if it is good or bad. And one thing was very important for me personally. Whenever I got good advice, I did went in, in kind of introspection and congratulated myself for that. It gives you motivation to carry on the next day. And when you get bad advice, think about the good advices that you get and good feedback, and try to get to the next day. So this was one of the things that was helping me personally. But other thing was working and getting selected into IGLUNA was already big. This was a good project, gives you credibility already. So you don't have to convince much to your partners and to your sponsors who you want to communicate with. And they will already agree, okay, you're getting into a project with Swiss Space Center, you must have some value, and then you can show value easily. You get the platform to discuss your project basically. And I could get very easy talks. So I knew Dr. Frank Zimmerman for like 1.5 years already, and we knew PT scientists for a very long time. We already met Kristof after IGLUNA though, but we were very easy to communicate and tell what we are looking for. And people are very supportive. If you're doing something challenging, people like to see that coming through, and they support you. And this is how helped us getting this project through. Documentation is very important. Project becomes very clear, and if you have presentation to discuss what you want to do, this actually gives a very good picture to the other person to understand what is going on in your head. So always when you discuss, you should have a presentation before you, or at least some kind of sketch, a common document to actually comment on, discuss on. Don't comment on ideas, comment on something already written ideas. I think this is important. This was one of the key enablers for me to understand what people understood, what didn't understood, what needed more explanation. And I could reflect this into my presentations later on. And for the next steps, yes, we are actually fortunate now to get into ISABIC, and we will be opening up. We already have an office in Bavaria, and we will be moving there. And although the team will be in Berlin, we are still in Technical University Berlin. I'm still student, so I'll stay in Berlin for some time more. But the technology now that will begin is more serious, I would say, in a way that we want to launch our first antennas already in September. We have good designs with us. We have experimentally tested one of the prototypes. It worked fine, and now we are improving that. So by September, we are already targeting the market as a company. And by the end of this year, we will launch our first antenna into the orbit to get the space heritage, which is one of the key things to actually have a product in the market. You need to have a space heritage. And then next year with IGLUNA, we are going we have planned a workshop for students to teach them about the link budgets, which give you holistic view about how the communication will happen. And I will make sure that I have a communication link budget for space habitat, so that people can really correlate about how much power they can give to a communication system to actually relay back their data from their lunar habitat to the ground station. So this is one thing coming up for IGLUNA 2021. So we won't be participating in 2021, but we will be kind of a partners or kind of an external support to IGLUNA 2021. And yeah, that would be it. And we are looking to get more market as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm, yeah, absolutely. And as you said, I totally agree with you that taking advice from experts on the field is something that you should consider from the very beginning. And having proper documentation throughout all the trajectory will help you a lot. And actually, I think IGLUNA within this documentation setup is helping a lot of students, because within all this year, we develop a kind of schedule in terms of preliminary design review, critical design review, and readiness review. And we evaluate the student documentation and how they can improve in future projects. I think Kristof was in some of these reviews with Celestial. You could tell us how did you see Celestial during those sections? What do you recommend to the students that are preparing for this kind of preliminary design or critical reviews? What do you really think is important? I think it would be very
what I liked about Celestial is that they were very open and very humble to feedback from experts, and not always are experts very subtle when they give feedback, but the IGLUNA team really took it well and they worked with it. So I appreciate that a lot. And also it was nice that our engineers and our old experts, I say old compared to you lot, were also challenged the other way around. Because sometimes we all get stuck in a certain mind frame, and then having somebody challenging you from just out of university, it's very pleasant. So I think that was a very good collaboration. I also liked about the Celestial team is that they really, like I said before, they really pick things up and they they prepare things. We always had the documentation in advance, so it was well prepared. Also, like this interview today, it was well prepared, well organized. So the professionalism is definitely very rewarding for us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kristof. Frank, would you like to add something more? What do you recommend to Celestial and to other teams and projects that are currently going throughout all these reviews and are putting up their projects to the space sector?
Yes, thank you. I actually would like to add something about the ESA BICs as well. But let me first congratulate as well Celestial to their receptiveness for the advice. I really very much remember when we talked first time on the phone. You told me about your plans. I got worried because typically I'm looking into, if we talk to startups, so what is your revenue soon, not long term? Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a very, very good, but in some aspects, of course, long-term vision. And my question was, how do you earn money now? Yeah, and I really appreciate that you took that on board, focusing on components, on technologies, which is really sustainable. Yeah, but just to kind of give that a bigger picture, because I think it's important also maybe to the audience outside. Celestial was accepted by the ESA BIC, and very much congratulations for that. You are starting in Bavaria. And as you may know, there are several more of these ESA BICs. We are running one in Darmstadt, but overall we have now 20 plus overall in the ESA member states. And they all support startups in developing their products and services. You get financial support, technical advice, but of course also feedback on your business plan. And we have, for example, regular competitions. Just now, there was the deadline for the Galileo Masters, the Copernicus Masters in parallel. But there's also in Germany something called the InnoSpace Masters, which is very interesting for startups like Celestial who want to work towards commercialization of space, so not only the application of it. And then, of course, hackathons. I mean, you mentioned Act in Space, and I really agree this is one of the very good opportunities to also form a team. I mean, competitions give you ideas, what could you do, and then you develop that further. But a hackathon helps you to actually build your team, to get new people on board, get to know other teams. And by the way, there is another edition of the Act in Space in November this year. We are running one in Darmstadt, but of course there are other ones across Europe. And I think for all those people outside who are watching us and are interested in forming a startup, it's a very good and low barrier just to enter, just to try out what you have in mind and get connected with space. And again, yes, of course, mentoring, coaching is important. And as I already said, it's really much appreciated then by the mentor if the mentee follows the advice and is actually successful. That's very good to see. Thank you.
Absolutely. And as you said, actually, Celestial started with the Athens Space Hackathon in 2018 in Berlin. And in 2 years, they have achieved a working product and developed technology that is actually going through TRL 3, starting from TRL number 1. So it's actually quite challenging and they have done a very good job. Robert, you're also a founder of PTS. I would like you to tell us how did you start your technology, because we hear that Celestial actually started in a hackathon in acne space. How your technology and your business started actually?
You mean for us at PTS? I mean, it was pretty much the same. You know, we started motivated by the Google Lunar XPrize. So that was basically Google saying, you know, there should be some private initiatives towards the moon. But in itself, of course, Google was just putting it out there, and our group basically, you know, most of it, the people come from the realms of the CCC, which in Germany is the Computer Chaos Congress or Computer Chaos Club. And that's basically a hacker and making community of people just building all kinds of electronics, communication devices, mostly networking, computer systems. So, and from this realm, most of the initial people came together, but of course we quite soon began getting people from the space industry on board, because of course from our ambitions going for a spacecraft segment, you need to have people who understand a little bit more about the rocket science part. But what we found is, what it's quite helpful is to connect domains, because, and I would even say that is today the case. You know, we in the space industry, we believe that the space industry is huge, but in reality, it's tiny. You know, if I come back to the example of the company like saying AWS, Amazon, they operate in their own world, addressing their own complete customer segment. And I think if the space industry can basically tear down the wall, differentiating it from all the other industries, connecting it more openly, like with IoT technology, with easier communication standards and you know, interfaces, with less proprietary solutions, then I think this will be the biggest game changer, you know, for humanity in that sense. Because really, if you saw what happened in all other industries over just 10, 20 years, it's crazy, the development scale. And space is still a little bit disconnected from that. You know, everybody always points to SpaceX, but that's just one way, just one example. And I think there's much, much more possibility. And I think everybody of us believes that, otherwise we wouldn't be so motivated with initiatives like this. So yeah, I really love the potential about it. And that's what got us all started. And I think that what all of us here today on this call keeps us motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with your definition that the space sector is not as huge as we think it is, because there are a lot of technologies being developed, but not in the same sense as other sectors are actually being developed. So following this up, I would like to bring up the topic of the people that tries to give some news and give some new technology to the space sector. In which specific area do you think they could develop their products that are actually not so developed right now? I guess there will be a market that is not so well developed, and students can actually learn from that and build up some ideas as Celestial has done. Frank, what do you think about the potential new sector in the space area?
Well, a few years ago, I would have said the main topics are satellite navigation, Earth observation, and communication. But we see more and more startups coming to us with expertise in, let's call it, cross-cutting technologies. Not only software engineering and these, let's call them basics. I'm not talking about artificial intelligence on the one hand side, data analytics, very important. So everything to do with machine learning. These are new topics, and I must say there is a lot of competence out there, and this is well received also by the space side. On the other hand, in the space domain, there are of course developments as well. If you think about operating satellites, this is very much autonomous by now, and for example, predictive maintenance so the anticipation of problems is of course something that, for example, at ESOC in Darmstadt, the Space Operations Center, there is a group only focusing on that. So there are cross-cutting technologies which kind of cover also other domains. And of course, there is a transversal exchange. And I like this very much. And we see that more and more. So the technology transfer not only from space to non-space, which we are more or less used to, and this has to continue, but also from the other side. So spin-in. Yeah? So what can we learn from the non-space domain, where there is much more expertise outside there? Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the feedback. And actually agree that machine learning and cutting-edge technologies are actually very well positioned nowadays in order to develop a career in the space sector. Kristof, would you like to add something more?
I can add something more, but it was indeed a good good overview. What I think is there are a few opportunities. First is the mobility market. People want to be internet connected on the move. Secondly, it's also what we believe in. I still believe in linear TV, so really live TV to handheld devices. Now, the last mile will come with 5G from the tower to the handheld device will come terrestrial. But to get live content to millions of towers, a broadcast channel over satellite is still very, very, very cost effective. So I think these are quite some big opportunities that are, and that's like what Frank said also. It's very interesting that the link in between the terrestrial networks and the satellite networks will get thinner and thinner. We will supply content to terrestrial networks, and terrestrial networks will do vice versa. They will distribute the content then to the handheld devices where it belongs, where people want to see it. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in satellite telecommunication with new technologies, but also with changing behavior of humans, where humans want more connectivity everywhere, with ultimately connectivity on the moon, which is what you were working on.
Thank you very much, Kristof. Really nice explain, actually, indeed. Thank you very much for your feedback. And lastly, I would like to bring up a topic that is very important, but as Frank said before, is not something that a project should care at the very beginning, which is actually making business and making funding and focus about money in general. Celestial started in 2018, and they didn't focus on winning money at the very beginning, but in developing actually good technology, something that can be used, something that is flexible, that can be configured. And actually, I would like to know, Mayank, what are your current plans for achieving funding? You are now in ISA, big Bavaria. How do you change from the transition of a student project to something that can be into the business sector or the space applications?
Yeah. So I think when you start with a project with a vision, it automatically starts becoming important. It ultimately sucks you in. So that's what happened with me. My idea just got me in. Actually, I couldn't leave it, and there was nothing better or more interesting happening around me than this thing. I think Robert could agree very well to this, right? We experience this kind of way when you start a startup. And what happened with us was, I think Celestial. I still remember when we first got our first funding, we got incubated into a local accelerator here in Berlin. I told my friend or my co-founder Johannes that you know what, today is going to be my last pitch on this. I am done, and I am an international student. I need to focus on my studies. And that is less to get selected. You know, it's like, where are you going? You know. So this is how ideas began, and then we slowly started making progress. Things got serious, and you see when your partner is working so hard, you also tend to go into that, working too much hard. And then we got our first prize in Space Masters last year. After a few months of that, then we got into IGLUNA, and now we're getting into ISAPIC. So things are getting growing and growing and growing, and we are just, I mean, this is not us controlling the project. I feel like project is controlling us. It is telling, yeah, this is what is happening with me. I mean, I don't have any control on this project, and we are just so much curious. And I have personally felt so much that there is so much of potential to be achieved, because now my master thesis, basically my education, is all about antennas and the communication system. So I got, and I know in my bachelor's I never heard about antennas. I used to hate this topic, and now I'm building a startup on that topic. So when you start making progress, this actually project sucks you in. And actually on this, I have one question which I have been personally wanted to ask Robert for a very long time, which is, when Robert started with PTS, back 12 years back, there was no space, no privatization happening so much. It was very distant future. People would easily think that you have lost it, and you're just thinking way out of your mind. How did you actually got the vision to see that? I mean, I had my vision for moon and infrastructure, but I could see things, coming up. How did you saw things coming up for moon, and you just went in there that, it's PTS now, and we will do this, and you thought you will get the money for it? So how did that happen with you?
Because, and that's actually still true today, for the space sector, I really see a great potential. It really feels like I was a big, science fiction space fan from the outside, but even as a system engineer, not involved in space before, because my background is in a different field. So, but looking at space, I was only, I didn't even notice SpaceX back then so much. So I was only seeing what was happened, with the shuttle program and other programs, and it really felt like there is so much potential, things that can be done, but we are basically at 0.1 of a scale of to 100 or something, or maybe we were at 0.4 or something. Not to discredit what was happening, but you really, and I think that is what happens when you start a startup, or when you get together with friends, you suddenly exceed this potential. You see a potential that you personally see, and maybe you even realize there's a much bigger potential. And I think that's what you need to get people excited about, what you need to get investors excited about, partners excited about. You need them to see the potential with you, and then you need to work on that. And that, again, that was what it was for us. And again, I can only say, I really believe that space is not just the niche market that we have today. I think it's a huge thing for humanity.
Great, great. This has always been something inspiration for me, because I believe that Lunar XPrize, where you started, is not just a competition. It's a historic moment in humankind, I think, because this is where maybe actual impulse for the privatization started. I mean, yes, SpaceX is a big thing, I agree, and there are a lot of other things, but you cannot ignore this one. This was, which for me personally, I heard first time, that something happening private with the moon. Then I heard before with SpaceX. So yeah, that would be my answer and my question also.
And I can just briefly add to that. You mean, if you look at SpaceX, it was funded by somebody who was already a billionaire by that time, and lots of money.
Exactly.
So if you and I, if we look at that, basically, and there would no such thing like the XPrize, then you will basically be like, yeah, cool, he did that, but I can never do this because I'm not a billionaire. I don't have that money. So it still kind of is a disconnect. But with things like the XPrize and many other initiatives like the ESA Big now, it basically takes it down to a level. Why don't you do it? What's your excuse to not do it? It's basically, it puts it on a very personal level. It takes away this barrier, and I think that is important.
Yeah, and just one more point I would like to add here for Dr. Frank Zimmerman. I still remember our conversation, and I was standing in the stairs of my university building when I had a call with you, and you said, "What happens from 2019 to 2025? Tell me." And this has been the biggest advice to me, which has changed the entire story. So again, thank you for this, and I will always remember, and I will always thank you for this advice. This was the biggest question mark, and I tell you, that night I couldn't sleep because of this one line. So thank you once again.
Don't make me feel guilty now, but that's okay.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's actually a very good answer. And following up what you said, Mayank, because as you said, you had your own vision for the communications in the moon for your own project, as well as Robert and Frank and Kristof, but people from the outside, and even more when you don't have something physical, when you don't have money behind you, maybe a little bit rejected to help you out. And in this kind of university projects in which people graduate and go to the industry directly, it's very hard to keep them in the team for more than 1 or 2 years. So how did you keep your team all together? And how did you manage to share your idea with them so they can actually follow you, even if there is no money in the table, even if there is not something physical, it's just an idea? How do you keep the motivation within your team?
Yeah, so I actually believe in one line. When you are a leader, when you are a founder, you have no right to say no. You just give up that right now. And now you have to do every possible thing to make things happen. At least this is your responsibility. Even if this gets destroyed, nothing is damaged on the team. You have to take it on yourself. You have to make that happen. This is why you should start a startup. Else, please don't start a startup. Because if you do not have this strength to endure this alone, you have no right to play with the future plans of other people around you, which can very easily happen in startups. So this is one thing for me. Definitely, I never ever think about giving up. I am sometimes in a position where I think there is no hope, but that is just for you to absorb it and digest it. But you have to work so hard that it has to work out. And second thing, discuss. Be open with your team. Be open with your colleagues and your partners. Explain your problem. They might know something which can help you, which can benefit you. For example, I can give you live example here. We are in IGLUNA, final demonstration happening, and we just came from ILA Berlin happening, and we had a brief conversation over there with Robert and with Andre over this, and we had just one communication exchange. Let's meet. And we came here and we met, and there is a good overlap, and we have now entire setup to present, which was probably something we would have done in Switzerland, in Lucerne, doing the actual setup. Now we got entire setup to explain our story. This is how you get benefited. For example, second one, the biggest advice that I got from Dr. Frank Zimmerman, you need to discuss things in order to not end up into a disaster. At least, I don't think any startup can end up in fully disaster. You can still gain a lot of things out of this, and then second startup could be your big next big thing. But please try to learn. Please try to absorb things. Don't be careless in this way, and enjoy the process. This is very important. Enjoy the process. This is what you have to do. Enjoy it. Even the tension, even the fear. Enjoy the fear. Enjoy the event. Yeah, like that.
Thank you very much. It's actually really motivating, Mayank. Thank you very much. From your perspective, Robert, you are also a founder. Would you like to add something more to this?
No, I don't really think I can add anything more to that, but I really like that motivation. So that's also, the passion is what should drive you. And I think we're all very passionate here.
Absolutely. And even more in the space sector. So with that last question, I would like to end the technical session. I would like to thank you very much, Kristof, Frank, Robert, and lastly, Mayank, the Celestial owner, for joining today. Has any last questions? Kristof, would you like to add something more?
On the question of motivation, I like to always quote Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink wrote a book about motivation, and there is no extrinsic motivation. The only one motivation there is intrinsic motivation, and that's based on three aspects. That is mastery, purpose, and autonomy. If you give people mastery, purpose, and autonomy, they will be motivated. And what is very cool about the Celestial team, they had really a purpose. That was the really good thing about it. The mastery that was in there because they had the specialists around them, and autonomy, yeah, that's obvious. If you're a startup, you have the autonomy to do what you do. But these 3 points are for me and for Daniel Pink, of course, key in motivation. And I think Celestial does that well. They provide mastery, autonomy, and purpose.
Absolutely, and it's a very good advice. Thank you very much, Kristof. Frank, would you like to say something else before ending the call?
Well, just one thing I want to emphasize. It was said already. I think the team is the most important asset. In the end, if you think about success factors, of course, there is the finance side, there's the technology, very important, the market, anything else, but the team is the most important one. And there is one thing I want to add to this. It's not only, let's say, the spirit when you work on your project, on your startup, it's also what do you want to achieve in life? And we're talking now also about how to, I mean, you will have a family hopefully at some point. What is your actual objective? And I still believe it's very important. A colleague at one time told me that, and I can really only agree. You need to also talk to your fellow founders to make sure that you're all aligned. Yeah, you have to know what their objectives are. If these objectives match, then you can be a very good team. And I think that's also important. So not only work, but also what is your private objective in life? That plays a role, I believe.
Absolutely, Frank. Thank you very much. Lastly, Robert, would you like to add something more?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but I think the only thing which I can add is basically to try to not find excuses to not do something, because I really, and maybe this is a more typical German thing which I notice, but many people that I know of, friends of mine, always said, you should not do this for this reason, for this reason, for this reason, and they have thousands of reasons not to do something. And I mean, you should really see again the possibilities and the opportunities. So I mean, there exist both worlds. There's enough world for everybody to live their life in the setting they want. But I think there's always a way where you can find a way to make it possible what you want to be possible. So just because everybody says it might not be a good idea, you should still think about maybe trying it.
Absolutely, very inspiring words. And actually, I share your vision about that there is no excuse for doing something that you really are passionate in. And even if it can be a crazy idea at the very beginning, I think if you put effort and you put time and you have a solid team with you, I think you could develop it even further. Mayank, would you like to add something more?
Yeah, just one thing. So when you start with a project, look one thing for sure: what is the social impact you are going to leave? This is always important. I believe as a space engineer, yes, space exploration and humankind expansion is important. But you know what? This Earth is already in a lot of problems, according to me. And one thing that will save this Earth is goodness, not innovations, not technology. It has you people have to feel what has to be done, and this is what is important as a startup. When you start with a startup with an idea, it should actually have an impact that improves the society on a whole. This is one of the very key thing which does not come in business plan, does not come in technology development, but yet is one of the key, I think, soul of a startup. And this is when I said, you know, when you have right motivation, things fall for you in places. This is what happened with us. We had the right intention and we wanted to work, and things fell for us in the right direction. So the social impact is one of the key things for me and should be
Absolutely.
considered.
Thank you very much, Mayank. Lastly, if somebody wants to contact you or Celestial for making business, for joining the project, or for knowing more about your experience, where can we contact you? Do we contact throughout LinkedIn, or what are your preferred via for
Yes,
contacting you?
I'm available at LinkedIn. You can just search Mayank dot. I'm just a single name, and sounds cool this way. And secondly, you can always contact me on my mail address, which I think we can put this later on.
Yeah, it will be in the description in the video, most likely.
Yes.
We will put the
And,
contacts there.
will be there, and obviously the email address for the company website. So this is all I can be contacted very easily. I'm pretty available person. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayank, and thank you everybody, Kristof, Frank, Robert, for joining as well. And I will see you in the next section, which is actually the 17th of July, because we have a business section with Celestial that is going to talk more about the business market and where Celestial is actually in the space sector. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will see you very soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.